Good day, everyone. I know we have been learning a lot of things already, and now we will be going to learn another significant topic. So, this is interviewing techniques. So, learning discussions involve the following. We will going to explain the difference between a structured and unstructured interview. We will going to discuss the importance of setting the proper tone for an interview, describe the role of the interviewer's attitude in the interviewing process, identify some of the characteristics of effective interviewing, list which types of statements tend to keep the interaction flowing or elicit self-exploration in the interviewee, explain the effects of empathy statements on the interview responses. We will going also to discuss or identify the various sources of error in the interview. We're going also to discuss it and appreciate the role of cultural, ethnic, and socioeconomic factors in the interview process. And lastly, we will going to explain how interview skills are acquired and developed. So, let's get started. So we have here the unstructured and structured interview. In structured interview, the interviewer read from printed set of questions using a standardized interview. So example, in job interview, all applicants for the positions were asked the same questions in the same sequence. Maybe yung mga questions na yon, naka-standardize siya na topic lang dapat doon is about ng sa educational background or yung mga qualities or yung mga job experiences ng applicant who is applying that certain position. And structured interview on the other hand is an unstandardized interview, meaning the questions asked in unstructured interview can change depending on how each individual responds. Meaning kung ano yung i-response ng client mo or ng interviewee, doon ka rin magbabase sa mga response niya. Doon mo rin ibabase yung mga questions mo na itanong sa kanya to understand him or her deeply. And questions asked are usually open-ended, and this open-ended will be discussed later. So, stay tuned lang kayo, okay? So, structured interview also is a narrow and restricted. Kasi nga, di ba, yung structured interview, nag-focus lang siya sa specific thing. Like, for example, it only focus on the educational background and work experiences ng interviewee. So, while unstructured interview is broad and restricted, though nakafocus lang yung questions or topic about sa tao or sa interviewee, but it touches a variety of areas sa buhay ng tao. Kasi, maybe yung tao i-share niya bigla yung about sa family niya, sa friends niya, or anything about sa buhay niya. So another, ang structured interview naman, also is a directive in a way that the interviewer directed, guided, and controlled the course of the interview. Kasi nga, di ba, there are sets of questions already that somehow direct the flow of the interview. So in unstructured interview naman, it is non-directive because the interviewer in this manner allows the interviewer to determine the direction of the interview. So best example nito is yung interview na nangyayari between clinical psychologist and a client. Di ba yung client ang nagsasalita about herself and the things that concerns about her, and then nakikinig lang yung interviewer or yung clinical psychologist about sa mga pinagsasabi o pinag-share ng kanyang client. Lastly, structured interview is best siyang gamitin in employment interview, and yung unstructured naman, best din siyang gamitin sa diagnostic interview. Especially when the clinical psychologist was interested in uncovering feelings, thoughts, and attitudes that might impede. Diba? Kailangan mo talaga ng unstructured interview para mas malalim mo pang or mas malalim pa ang malaman mo sa tungkol sa isang tao, especially if you want to uncover feelings, thoughts, and attitudes about sa client mo or sa interviewee. So, interview is like a test. Like any psychological or educational test, an interview is a method for gathering data or information about individual. So this information is then used to describe the individual, make future predictions, or both. So like tests, interviews can be evaluated in terms of standard psychometric qualities such as reliability and validity. Like any other test or like any test, the interview involves the interaction of two or more people, Some interviews proceed like individually administered tests, with the interviewer interacting with a single individual at a time. In others, such as a family interview, a single interviewer works with two or more individuals at the same time, as in group tests. So, interview is just like a test. So we have now come to the reciprocal nature of interviewing, or this is the time we will going to discuss the setting the proper tone of an interview. Although maraming klase at may iba't ibang purpose ng interviews, all share certain factors. So first, all interviews involve mutual interaction whereby the participants are interdependent. That is, they influence each other. So for example, if one of the participants in the interview increase his or her activity level, then the activity of the other participants also increase, and if there is a reduction in activity by one, matitrigger din niya yung isa. So there is also a reduction na mangyayari sa other participants kasi nga 'di ba they influence each other. So interview participants not just influence each other but also affect each other's mood. Dito na rin pumapasok ang concept na social facilitation, meaning we tend to act like the models around us. That is why if the interviewer himself is tense, anxious, and defensive, ganun din ang magiging response ng interviewee. That is why if you are an interviewer, you need to be calm, open, warm, acceptable or accepting if you would like to have an interviewee na calm, open, and then comfortable din. Kasi diba ang tendency kapag ang interviewer, magiging defensive siya, magiging defensive din yung interviewee. Like parang hindi na siya mag-share ng kung ano man yung about sa self niya kasi nagiging defensive na siya. So basically, you need to exhibit the qualities you would like your participants would respond to you as well. Kasi kung ano yung pinapakita mo, yun din ang ipapakita sa iyo ng interviewee. Like kung mabait ka, syempre mabait din yung interviewee sa iyo. Like kung open ka, mas makakapag-trigger or mas i-encourage yung interviewee na maging open din siya sa kanyang sarili. So because the participants in an interview influence each other, the good interviewer knows how to provide a relaxed and safe atmosphere through social facilitation. However, kahit na both parties influence each other, the good interviewer remains in control and sets the tone. So with that, the interviewer must remain relaxed, confident, and self-assured so that the interviewer has a calming effect on the interviewee. Kasi 'di ba kung hindi confident, hindi self-assured at hindi relaxed or yung tense yung mga yung interviewer, ganun din kasi ang mangyayari sa interviewee. Magiging tense din sila, magiging hindi sila confident. So kailangan mo mag-set ng right tone. Kaya as an interviewer, you need to relax, be confident and self-assured para magkakaroon din ng calm effect yung interviewee. Diba kasi naranasan nyo na ba na being in an interview, tapos kung yung nag-interview sa'yo napaka-relax, napaka-accepting, yung para bang comfortable ka sa kanya, yung pagiging tense mo or yung pagiging anxious mo at the very first time na umupo ka doon sa upuan mo at bago pa magsimula ang interview, as the interviews goes by, di ba kapag mabait, kapag welcoming yung nag-interview sa'yo, parang hindi mo nalalaman na nawala na pala yung kaba mo, nawala na yung tense mo, hindi ka na nervous kasi nga 'di ba accepting masyado yung nag-i-interview sa iyo. So yun nga, kapag relax lang, kapag confident at self-assured lang ang interviewer, ganun din ang mangyayari sa interviewee. Now we have come talk about principles of effective interviewing. So if there are things or if we are in need to consider setting a proper tone, there are also in need to set a proper attitudes or yung parang you need these attitudes if you are an interviewer. So good interviewing is actually more a matter of attitude than skill. So attitudes related to good interviewing include warmth, genuineness, acceptance, understanding, openness, honesty, and fairness. Kasi 'di ba, ang tendency if you are an interviewer who is genuine, who is accepting, who is understanding, who is open and honest, mangyayari din is that yung interviewee mo, magiging genuine din siya, magiging open, and magiging honest sa kanyang sarili. I mean, he or she will share what's the truth about herself. Like, hindi siya magiging defensive. Kasi according to sa book, the session received a good evaluation by both participants when the participant or the patient saw that the interviewer as warm, open, concerned, involved, committed, and interested regardless of a subject matter or type of severity of the problem. Kasi, di ba, if you are committed, if you have illicit na pinapakita mo na committed ka, interested ka sa interviewee or kung ano yung mga pinagsasabi niya, mas may encourage siya to share, to give information about sa sarili niya. So on the other hand, independent of all other factors, so when the interviewer was seen as cold, defensive, uninterested, and involved, aloof, and bored, so the session was rated poorly. Kaya importante talaga na as an interviewer, you are manifesting a proper attitude. Kaya huwag maging attitude if you are an interviewer. So, sino nga ba naman kasi ang gaganahan if yung nag-interview sa'yo ay cold and parang uninterested? So, if you are a psychologist with this kind of attitude na defensive, uninterested, and involved, how can be your client share and give you in-depth information if ma-attitude ka, right? So, ang tendency, magiging defensive at malihim na lang yung client sa'yo. So, as a good interviewer, you need to set a proper attitude. I mean, you need to have this proper attitude para yung interviewee mo, mag-i-elicit din sila ng proper attitude. Magiging open sila. So, instead na maging defensive sila, kasi defensive ka rin, so magiging open sila kasi open ka rin. If you are genuine, so magiging genuine din sila sa feeling nila. And if you are understanding, di ba, if you have this understanding, o mafe-feel ng interviewee na you are an understanding person, maiintindihan mo sila despite sa kung ano man yung i-share nila sa'yo, so they will be comfortable to share information to you. So it is really important to set a proper attitude and especially to set a proper tone. If we need to set a proper tone and need to have a proper attitude, then we also need to have, or we need also to avoid some responses. So there are responses that needs to be avoided. So making interviews feel uncomfortable tends to place them on guard, and guarded and anxious interviewees tends to reveal little information about themselves. Kasi diba, if you are an interviewee yourself, how can you share or how can you give information to someone if you are uncomfortable to him or to her? So if the goal is to elicit as much information as possible or to receive good rating from the interviewee, then interviewers should avoid certain responses including judgmental or evaluative statements, probing statements, hostility, and false reassurance. So being judgmental means evaluating the thoughts, feelings, or actions of another. So have you ever been judged by someone? Like, na-judge ka na ba? Or have you ever judged someone? Or na-judge mo na ba ang isang tao? Like, sabihin mo, ayan siya, bad man yan siya, stupid man yan siya, yuck, disgusting man yan siya, and other judgments na binibigay natin sa tao. So when we use such terms as good, bad, excellent, terrible, disgusting, disgraceful, and stupid, we make evaluative statements. So by judging others, we put them on guard, and it also inhibits others is in revealing important information. So instead na mag-share pa sana sa'yo yung interviewee, hindi na lang kasi baka i-judge mo na lang siya. Thus, unless ang goal ng interview is to determine how a person responds to being evaluated, evaluative or judgmental statements should usually be avoided. Kasi diba, if you are, ilagay mo ang sarili mo as an interviewee. So kung yung interviewer ay judgmental, like, sasabihan ka, huh? Bakit mo yun ginawa? You're so bad. You're so terrible. You're so disgusting. How can you share to someone? How can you share to that interviewer about yourself or information about yourself kung takot ka namang i-judge. So, di ba you tend to be guarded or magiging anxious ka in sharing information. So, kaya ang mangyayari, little information lang yung mabibigay mo and guarded pa yung mga pinag-share mo. So, that's why, as an interviewer, you need to avoid of being judgmental unless kailangan ng judgmental na responses sa evaluation. So, proving statements naman demands more information than the interviewee wishes to provide voluntarily. So, example nito, sabihan mo ang interviewee ng, why? Bakit? Kapalit-palit ba ako? Char, joke lang. Hindi ganon. Like, why did you do that? Like, why did you stay out so late? So, kung ganunin mo yung, yung interviewee, this then makes the interviewee defensive. Kasi 'di ba, ikaw ba naman ang tanungin na, bakit mo nagawa ang bagay na 'yon? 'Di ba magiging defensive ka, sasabihin mo na, kasi kasi ganito, kasi ganyan. So, you tend to become defensive sa sarili mo. So, proving may induce the interviewee to reveal something that he or she is not yet ready to reveal. So, if this happens, the interviewee will probably feel anxious and thus not well disposed to revealing additional information. So, but in some circumstances, proofs are appropriate and necessary. In such circumstances, one must use the proving statement wisely. So, instead na sabihin mo na, bakit? Or why did you do that? Why did you yell at him? Statements, you replace them. So, instead na why statements, papalitan mo siya ng tell me or how statements. Example, why did you yell at him? So, yung why na statement na why did you yell at him, papalitan mo siya na, tell me more about what happened. How did you happen to yell at him? How led up to the situation? Kasi 'di ba, parang hindi ka naman nagdidemand agad na, why? Bakit mo yung nagawa? Instead na, sabihin mo sa akin, bakit ganun ang nangyari? Paano yun nangyari? Mga ganun-ganun lang. So, instead na why statement, ang gagamitin mo is tell and how statement. So, the hostile statement directs anger towards the interviewee. So, yung hostile responses. So, clearly, one should avoid such responses unless one has a specific purpose, such as determining how an interviewer responds to anger. Next is false reassurance. So, example nun, sabihan mo ang interviewee na, don't worry, everything will be fine. Tapos, malaki na nga ang problema ng friend mo or ng family member mo or ng kapatid mo, sabihin mo lang na, don't worry, everything will be fine, kahit na alam mo namang hindi okay. Though there are times na importante ang reassurance, but as a responsible interviewee, you should avoid false reassurance. Kasi, ang tendency kapag nagbibigay ka ng false reassurance, parang iisipin ng tao or nung interviewee sa'yo na you are lying, you're a liar. So, para ma-avoid mo yung mga gano'n na mga statement, na mga judgment na you are a liar. So, you need to avoid false reassurance. Dapat magpakatotoo ka rin sa sarili mo. So, yeah, so these are the responses needs to avoid: being judgmental, proving statements, hostile responses, and false reassurance. If there are responses to be avoided, there are also effective responses. So, one major principle of effective interviewing is keeping the interaction flowing. So, except in structured interviews or for a particular purpose, one can effectively initiate the interview process by using an open-ended question. So, open-ended question requires the interviewer to produce something spontaneously. Like, open-ended questions are those that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. And yung close-ended question naman brings the interview to a dead halt, thus violating the principle of keeping the interaction flowing. Kasi close-ended questions are questions that can only be answered by selecting from a limited number of options, usually multiple choice questions with a single word answer yes or no, or rating scale like from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So thus it really brings the interview to a dead halt. So, open-ended questions cannot be answered by yes or no, pero yung close-ended questions, it can be answered by yes or no, or yung strongly agree, strongly disagree. To better understand what is a close-ended question and what is an open-ended question, so we have here a table taken from the book of Kaplan. So, for example, sa close-ended questions, do you like sports car? Diba, ang sasabihin mo lang, yes, no. Yes, I like sports cars. No, I don't like sports cars. Pero sa open-ended questions, example nito, like, what kinds of cars do you like? So you would say, I like blue cars, I like red cars, I like Lamborghini, I like kahit anong mga brand ng mga cars na gusto mo. Or anong type ng cars. What are the kinds of cars? Or quality ng cars na gusto mo? Or ano ba yung price ng cars na gusto mo, di ba? Marami kayong mapag-uusapan. That's just yes or no ang isasagot mo. So example, another example, do you like do you like baseball? So sasabihin mo, yes, I like baseball. No, I don't like baseball. Pero sa open-ended question, example nito, what kinds of recreational activities do you prefer? So hindi lang baseball ang pag-uusapan dito. Any recreational activities na gusto mo, 'di ba? Kasi sometimes hindi lang naman isa ang gusto mo, or what kinds of recreational activities do you prefer? So 'di ba hindi lang naman isa yung prefer mo na recreation activity. Sometimes we like many things. So are you having a problem? 'Di ba? Sagutin mo lang, yes, yes, I have a problem. No, I have a problem. Pero kung ang tanong sa na open-ended questions like, can you tell me about your problem? So, syempre, marami kayong mapag-uusapan kasi you will tell your problems, what are your problems, bakit ka nagka-problema, mga ganun. So, mag-flow talaga yung conversation sa interview. So, is your father strict? Yes or no? What is your father like? So sa tanong na what is your father like, hindi lang naman sasabihin mo, my father is strict. So, hindi lang naman ganun, di ba? So, baka sabihin mo na, my father is a very good man, he is a very good husband, a very good father, he is an influential father, and mga ganun-ganon. So, what would you like to vacation in Hawaii? Would you like to vacation in Hawaii? Yes or no? Or what your favorite vacation spot? So, hindi lang Hawaii. Baka gusto mo sa Siargao, sa Boracay, or any other vacation spots na you would prefer or you would like to go. So yeah, that's the close-ended question. Yes or no lang naman. Or you would answer yes or no, or pwede rin naman yung strongly agree, strongly disagree. Pero yung open-ended question talaga, you will tell a lot or you will tell more. These are the responses that keeps the interaction flowing. So, these responses includes transitional phrase, verbatim playback, paraphrasing and restatement, summarizing, clarification, response, empathy, and understanding. So, in transitional phrase, sasabihin mo lang, yes, I see, go on. For example, sa transitional phrase, sasabihin ng interviewee na, I graduated from Mindanao State University with a degree program of BE Psychology. So the interviewer would respond, yes, I see. Go on. So this will indicate na, sige, continue ka lang kung ano man ang gusto mo pang sabihin. Continue mo lang kung ano pa ba ang gusto mong i-share. So another is the verbatim playback. So repeats the interviewer's exact word. Like, for example, kanina, sabihin niya na, I graduated from Mindanao State University with a degree program of BE Psychology. So, typically, the interviewer would respond that you graduated from MSU and then with a course degree or with a course BE Psychology or degree of BE Psychology. Next, we have there the paraphrasing and restatement. So, from the words themselves, you were just going to paraphrase or restate the responses of the interviewee. So the interviewee might said that my master's degree should help me assume the duties of the new position. So the interviewer replied, you feel that your master's degree is a useful asset in your application. So that's the restatement. Next, you feel that your master's degree will be an important aid in taking on the responsibilities of new position. That's paraphrasing. So basically, you will just paraphrase, you will just restate what the interviewee has been telling you or sharing with you. So next we have here the summarizing. So summarizing, you just post together the meaning of several responses. So you will just summarize kung ano mo yung pinagsasabi ng interviewee sa'yo. Summarize mo lang yung kung ano yung mga gi-share niyang information towards you. So, clarification response, you just clarify the interviewee's response. Like, for example, sasabihin niya na hindi sa gusto kong hindi ko gusto yung trabaho ko, hindi ko gusto yung na mag-overtime or work hard. I just would like to have some time for myself. Like, so i-clarify mo lang na, so yeah, so sabihin ng interviewer, so you like to have some time alone with yourself. Yung mga ganun. So, you just clarify kung ano man yung response ng interviewee. So next we have here the empathy and understanding. So even more powerful is the empathy or understanding response. This response communicates that the interviewee understands how the interviewee feels. Like for example, sasabihin ng interviewee na she was being bullied by her friends or inaawa siya ng kanyang mga kaibigan. So the interviewer might say, that must make you angry. So you see, pinapakita mo talaga sa interviewee na you feel and understand what she feels. Kasi kakaiba talaga yung feeling na kapag someone understands you, someone feels what you feels, someone genuinely understands or kanang nakikipagsimpatiya talaga sa iyo kung ano man talaga yung nararamdaman mo. It gives an overwhelming feeling and contented ka, diba? Kasi someone's really understands you. So, powerful talaga yung response ng empathy and understanding. The effects of empathy statements and the interviewer responses. Diba? The empathy or understanding response communicates that the interviewer understands how the interviewee feels. So, diba, when we show people, we understand them. So, they will talk about or explore themselves at even deeper levels. Kasi if we pinapa-feel natin sa isang tao na, yes, I understand you. Syempre, ikaw na interviewee, you have become this, magiging open ka kasi parang sa feeling mo, yes, sa wakas, someone understands me, someone validates my feelings, someone really genuinely understands me. Yung pang ganon, yung parang if you have someone understands you, you will explore yourself deeper and mas mag-share ka pa ng deeper levels ng information about yourself. Kasi kakaiba talaga ang feeling kasi if someone really understands you, someone has this empathy towards you. Kasi yung empathy statements, napakalaki talaga ng effects niya sa response ng interviewee. Kasi yun nga, it will let the interviewee explore themselves at ever deeper level. So, kaya if you're an interviewer, don't forget to be understanding sa mga taong ini-interview mo. For them to be, not to be guarded, but rather to let them explore themselves more in a deeper manner. We can further appreciate understanding statements by analyzing measures of understanding. So, attempts to measure understanding or empathy originated ito kay Carl Rogers' seminal research into the effects of client-centered therapy. So, originated talaga tong measuring understanding or empathy sa work ni Carl Rogers. Yung client, 'di ba? Yung client-centered therapy ni Carl Rogers, I think you remember pa yung sa top natin. So, yung levels nito hanggang level 5 kasi to eh. So, first or yung level 1 response. Level 1 responses bear or no relationship to the interviewee's response. So, for example nito, 'di ba, itong example, sabihin ni Sarah, Victor, look at my new dress. Sabihin naman ni Victor, I sure hope it doesn't rain today. So Sarah, see, it's red with blue stripes. Victor, if it rains, my baseball game might get cancelled. So Sarah, I really love this dress. It's my favorite, Victor. So it's sure going to going to tick me off if the games gets cancelled. So the two people are really talking only to themselves. So level 1 response, wala talagang relasyon na makikita, 'di ba? Kasi para kay Sarah, 'di ba? New dress yung pinag-uusapan niya. Pero si Victor naman parang may sariling mundo rin na iniisip niya rin yung sana hindi uulan ngayon. So the two people are really talking only to themselves. Para silang nagkakaroon ng point of view. Now we have here the level 2 responses. So in level 2 response, communicates only a superficial awareness of the meaning of a statement. So example nito, meron tayong example dito taken from the book of Kaplan. So sabihin na naman ni Sarah, "Boy, I feel good. I just got a beautiful new dress." Si Victor naman sabi niya, "I feel bad. It's probably going to rain." Sarah, "I'll wear this dress to your baseball game." Victor, "If it rains, there won't be a game." So, parang makikita mo 'di ba yung sabihin ni Sarah na yung dress na ito ay gagamitin niya sa baseball game ni Victor. Ang sabihin naman ni Victor, kapag uulan, so walang game. So, parang mayroong relationship, 'di ba? Parang nagko-communicate yung dalawa. However, it is just a superficial awareness. Superficial lang yung relasyon ng conversation nila, 'di ba? Here the conversation is related but only superficially. Neither person really responds to what is going on with the other. So now we also have here the level 3 responses. So a level 3 response is interchangeable with the interviewee's statement. Diba? Yung sa level 3 is the minimum level of responding that can help the interviewee. So, di ba na-learn natin kanina yung mga paraphrasing, verbatim playback, clarification statements, and restatements? Yun lahat yun ay example ng level 3 responses. So kapag i-clarify mo, kapag nag-verbatim playback ka, pag nag-paraphrase ka, that belongs to the level 2 responses. So it is recommended that beginning interviewers learn to respond at level 3 before going onto the more advanced level. So kapag beginner ka pa na interviewers, kailangan mong i-learn muna yung response ng level 3, which is yung nagpa-paraphrase ka, yung nag-verbatim playback ka, sabi mo, I see, yung mga ganon, and restatement. So yun yung mga level 2 response. So, ito naman yung level 4 and 5 responses. So, level 4 and level 5 responses not only provide accurate empathy, but also go beyond the statement given. So, for example, sabihin ni Sarah, "I got a new dress." So, sabihin naman ni Victor, "You feel so happy because you like new clothes." Sarah, "This one is beautiful. It has a red and blue stripes." Victor, "You really love the new dress. It is nice addition to your wardrobe." So, diba dito, ang ganda na ng flow ng conversation. There is really a relationship or connected na talaga yung conversation ng dalawa. So, this is the level 4 and level 5 responses. This not only provide accurate empathy, but also go beyond the statement given. The foundation of a good interviewing skills for many different types of interviews is an active listening. So, being an interviewer, you need to be an active listener. Kasi for you to better understand, for you to better give an empathy or understand the interviewee, you need to become an active listener. Because how can you relate, how can you understand, and how can you give proper response if you are not an active listener? So, we should listen attentively to our interviewee for us to act, respond in a rightful manner. These are the types of interviews: evaluation interviews, structured clinical interviews, case history interview, mental status examination. So evaluation interview, from the word itself, evaluation, so you're going to evaluate an interviewee. A confrontation is a statement that points out a discrepancy or inconsistency. Though confrontation is usually most appropriate in therapeutic interviews, all experienced interviewers should have this technique at their disposal. So, in the book of Kaplan, according to Karhoff, 1969, he distinguished among three types: discrepancy between what the person is and what he or she wants to become. Second, a discrepancy between what the person says about himself or herself and what he or she does. And number three, discrepancy between what the person's perception of himself or herself and the interviewer's experience of the person. So, kasi 'di ba, mayroon talagang mga inconsistency tayo sa mga sarili natin. Iba yung ginagawa natin at iba yung ding iniisip natin about sa sarili natin. So, iba yung iniisip or perception natin sa sarili natin at iba rin yung na-experience ng interviewer sa atin. So basically, that's evaluation interview. Now we have the structured clinical interview. So over the past 25 years, structured clinical interviews have proliferated. It is an overview guide that is administered by a psychologist or other mental health professionals who is familiar with the diagnostic criteria of mental health conditions. So, the development of structured clinical interviews followed the evolution of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders o yung DSM. So, first published in 1952 and revised numerous times. So, the DSM attempts to classify mental disorders into specific definable categories. So before the 1980 DSM-3, however, mental disorders were poorly defined. So the result was markedly low reliability in psychiatric diagnostics. So the DSM-3 and subsequent editions, DSM-4 and now the DSM-5 to be published. So na-publish siya yung May 2013. So attempted to overcome this lack of reliability by providing a specific set of criteria for each category of mental disorder. So specifically, with specifiable criteria for mental disorders, one could develop a specific set of questions to determine whether or not a person met the criteria. So that's how or what happened in structural clinical interview. So magkakaroon ka ng yung mga specific criteria for mental disorders. So with that criteria, you can develop a specific set of questions to determine during the interview if that person really met the criteria na mayroon siyang mental disorder. So now, let's proceed to the case history interview. So, an interview that begins with an open-ended question followed by 3-level and perhaps level 4 response can yield a wealth of data about an individual. Diba? Yung level 3 response, yun yung mga paraphrasing, verbatim playback. Yung mga level 4 response naman, go beyond the empathic level, diba? And so, with that mga responses na gagamitin mo as an interviewer, makakakuha ka ng maraming information about the individual. So, to obtain a complete case history that is a biological sketch, one often needs to ask specific questions. So, case history data may include a chronology of major events in the person's life, a work history, a medical history, and a family history. So, a family history should include a complete listing of the ages and genders of each member of the immediate family. So one should also note whether any family members, including parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, and siblings, have had difficulties similar to those of the interviewee. So many conditions occur more frequently in families than in general population. So, in obtaining a case history, the interviewer often takes a developmental approach, examining an individual's entire life, beginning with infancy or the point at which the given type of history is first relevant. So, for example, the interviewer may say, tell me about your work record, beginning with your first paid job. So, after the work history is clarified, another category such as medical history can be explored. So, naturally, such interviews are highly structured. So, meaning, mayroon kang sinusunod na set of questions kasi highly structured siya eh. Diba? If you are going to use a structured interview, you will have the set of questions or standardize yung interview na mangyayari. So, now we have here the mental status examination. An important tool in psychiatric and neurological examinations, the mental status examination is used primarily to diagnose psychosis, brain damage, and other major mental health problems. So, it Its purpose is to evaluate a person suspected of having neurological or emotional problems in terms of variables known to be related to this problem. So, the areas covered in mental status examination include the person's appearance, attitudes, and general behavior. So, the interviewer is also alert to the interviewee's emotion. Kasi nga, diba, we are examining psychiatric and or mental status ng tao. So the areas covered in the mental status examination include the person's appearance, attitudes, and general behavior. So the interviewer is also alert. Talagang alert dapat dito sa emotion yung interviewer. Kung ano man yung mga pinapakitang emotion ng interviewee. So yeah, this mental status examination is an important tool for psychiatric and neurological examinations. Kaya nga, kailangan talaga na mayroong skills, nakapag-train, or mayroong talagang background, or may idea talaga ang interviewer, sa kung ano man yung ginagawa niya, or ano man yung ini-interview niya. You cannot just be an interviewer na walang alam about sa mental status or mga bagay o mga criteria na dapat nasa taong may ganitong illness or mental health. So that's all. Those are the types of interviews. Diba sabi ko nga kanina na you cannot just be an interviewer because you like to become an interviewer. You cannot just interview someone without having this proper knowledge, proper wisdom about kung ano man yung pinag-i-interviewhan mo. So, that's why there are steps in acquiring interviewing skills. So, these are the steps on how to develop interviewing skills. So, the first step in doing so is to become familiar with research and theory on the interview in order to understand the principles and underlying variables in the interview. Kasi hindi ka pwedeng sasabak ng giyera kung wala ka namang bala. Hindi ka sasabak ng giyera kung hindi mo naman alam kung paano mag-combat. Hindi ka sasabak ng giyera kung wala kang kadala-dalang armas, right? So, that is why, as an interviewer, for you to have an interviewing skills or develop an interviewing skills, you need to first familiarize with research and theory on the interview in order to understand the principles and underlying variables in the interview. So, para alam mo talaga kung ano ang nangyayari, ano ang dapat pangyari, at ano ang dapat gagawin kapag you are conducting an interview or you become an interviewer. Like kanina, ano ba dapat yung proper tone or setting tone sa interview? Ano ba dapat yung proper attitudes? Yung mga ganun, on any theory na and mga research na kailangan mong malaman in order to have an effective interviewing skills. Pangalawa is, so a second step in learning such skills is supervised practice. Experience truly is the best teacher. So wala nang ibang mas best na teacher but yung experience mismo. So because applicants who receive coaching perform better in interview than applicants who did not. Kakaiba talaga kasi if you experience it with yourself. Kasi kakaiba talaga ang dala ng experience sa atin. So supervised practice, that's the second step. The third step or the third one is that one must make a conscious effort to apply the principles involved in good interviewing. So, such as guidelines for keeping the interaction flowing. Diba, nag-ano tayo kanina, nag-discuss tayo ng mga proper tone, yung mga attitudes, what are the guidelines, so ano yung mga nakakapag-keep ng interaction flow, diba? Yung mga responses to avoid, mga effective responses, kung paano dapat yung mga response mo. So, dapat, yung mga principles na na-learn mo na yon, dapat you are applying it. You are consciously applying, or you make an effort to apply those principles involved to have a good interviewing skill. So, this application includes constant self-evaluation. For example, nasabihin mo, you will continually asking yourself na na what does this person mean? So, ano ba talaga ang ibig sabihin ng taong to? O ano ba yung gustong ibig sabihin ng interviewee? So, am I communicating that I understand? So, naiintindihan ko ba talaga kung anong sinasabi ng interviewee? So, is the person exploring at deeper level? So, that interviewee, is he or she exploring herself or himself at deeper levels? So what is being communicated non-verbally? So you will not just looking at the verbal aspect, but you will also look at the non-verbal aspect. So maybe, kasi minsan talaga yung message talaga nasa non-verbal aspect din. So it is important not just to look at the verbal aspect, but also to the non-verbal aspect. So kailangan mo rin malaman kung ano ba yung mga gestures, ano ba yung mga ginagawa ng interviewee non-verbally. So these are the steps to have or to develop an interviewing skills. So these are the sources of error in the interview. So interview validity. So many sources of interview error come from extreme difficulty we have in making accurate logical observations and judgment. So we have here the halo effect, or the tendency to judge specific traits on the basis of a general impression. So in the interview, halo effects occur when the interviewer forms a favorable or unfavorable early impression. So the early impressions then biases the remainder of the judgment process. Diba, if maganda first impression natin sa isang tao, all throughout makikita lang natin ang kagandahan ng tao na yan. So with an early favorable impression or positive halo, the interviewer will have difficulty seeing the negatives. So similarly, with an early negative halo, the interviewer will have difficulty seeing the positives. Kasi 'di ba, kapag maganda ang first impression natin sa tao, maganda na 'yan yung hahanapin natin sa kanya. But minsan talaga may makikita lang natin ng tao, negative na agad yung impression natin sa kanya. And sometimes, di ba, pag we have this negative impression, like, makita lang natin ang tao, sabihin natin, ay, ito, masamang tao to. Kasi, malaki ang mataas ang balbas, maganyan. So, kung yan ang impression natin na masamang tao na yan, all throughout, magiging avoidant tayo sa kanya. Kasi, masamang tao yan. So, ilalayo natin ang sarili natin sa kanya. So, makikita mo lang talaga sa kanya yung negative na aspect. So, that's negative halo. So, the interviewer will have difficulty seeing the positives. So in short, halo effects impair objectivity and must be consciously avoided. So bawal yung mga first impressions kasi this will bias your objectivity as an interviewer. So meron din aside sa halo effect yung mga impression. So we have also the general standout-ishness. So ito, example nito, a well-groomed attractive individual might be rated higher in intelligence than would a poorly groomed and attractive individual, even if the latter was actually more intelligent than the former. So, di ba, may tendency tayo na kapag ang isang tao na maganda ang katayuan, yung mga malinis, maganda, or gwapo, with matching eyeglasses pa yan ha, so masasabi agad natin sa utak natin, ay, ito matalinong tao to, matalinong bata to siya. Pero yung mga taong sinasabing gusgusin lang, di masyadong ma-artist self, sabihin agad natin, dito matalino. So we base the intelligence na lang doon sa appearance ng tao. So this claim supports the widely recognized concept that physical appearance can play a major role on how a job applicant is perceived and rated. Kasi 'di ba, kapag yung job applicant mo malinis, yung parang neat and clean, gwapo, so syempre, magiging bias ka compared doon sa isang hindi masyadong neat and clean, pero mas, kung i-weigh mo talaga, mas skillful, mas talented, mas matalino yung hindi masyadong neat and clean compare sa neat and clean na tao. So that is general standout-ishness. So, yung halo effect at yung general standout-ishness. So, another potential source of error naman in the interview can be found in cross-ethnic, cross-cultural, and cross-class interviewing. Kasi nga, di ba, iba-iba ang kultura natin. People are from all walks of life, which comes from different ethnicity, culture, and classes. So, if sa iba yung di ba sa iba, kung sa iba, magka-eye contact ka sa tao, while talking, that means you respect someone kasi you are listening attentively to what he or she is trying to convey or trying to say. Kaso yung ibang culture naman, having an eye contact means you are disrespecting someone. So the misunderstanding of cultural differences leads to interviewer bias. Sources of error such as cultural distortions can reduce the validity of interview data. So errors that reduce the objectivity of the interviewer produce inaccurate judgment, thus biasing the validity of the evaluation. These tendencies perhaps explain why the predictive validity of interview data varies so widely. Kasi 'di ba, yung mawawala talaga yung logical or accurate na mga or yung mga judgments natin kasi 'di ba first yung halo effect kasi hindi talaga may iwasan, we have this tendency na magkaroon ng first impression. Like, makita mo nga lang, na-experience nyo ba na makita mo nga lang yung isang tao, bago mo pa nga nakita, sabihin, ay, maldita ni siya. I mean, ay, hindi maganda ang ano nito, hindi maganda ang attitude nito, ma-attitude to. Kasi may mga first impression talaga tayo sa isang tao, which is not right because it will distort the objectivity ng isang interviewer. So that's it. That's how the sources of error in interview validity. Ito naman yung sources of error sa reliability ng interview. So for interview data, the critical questions about reliability have centered on the interviewer agreement. Naalala niyo pa ba yung iterator sa topic natin ng reliability? Yung agreement between two or more interviewers, or yung paano kung sa iterator kung paano nila girate yung isang tao or yung behavior ng isang tao. So, 'di ba? So, yung reliability ng interview kasi na ano siya sa agreement between two or more interviewers. So, according kay McCarthy, kay Van, and kay Kaplan noong 2010, they argued that one reason for fluctuations in interview reliability is, in part, because interview procedures vary considerably in their degree of standardization in terms of interview development, administration, and or scoring. Kasi yung idea kasi ng interview reliability is simply different interviewers look for different things. An argument echoed by others. So thus, whereas one interviewer might focus on strengths, another might focus on weaknesses. So the two interviewers would disagree because their judgments are based on different aspects of the individual. Na I know you have known already kung ano yung iterator na ano doon sa reliability, no? Same lang kasi dito kasi nakadepende kasi yung reliability, yung consistency ng interview doon sa interviewers. Kasi nga 'di ba, sabi ko nga kanina, different talaga kasi minsan kasi different yung subjective perception ng mga nag-i-interview. Yung isa may siguro na-focus niya yung pag-observe niya sa interviewee kung ano yung weakness ng interviewee. Yung isa namang interviewer, might na-focus niya naman yung subjective ano niya doon sa strength ng interviewee. So, yun yung sources of error dito sa reliability, yung agreement na between two or more interviewers. Kasi 'di ba kailangan sa reliability yung consistency. Paano magkakaroon ng consistency kung mayroong disagreement between the interviewers? So that's the sources of error again in the interview reliability. Thank you everyone. I hope na may na-learn kayo kahit isa, dalawa, tatlo man lang. And if you have any questions, you can find me or you can text me at my number here. And you can also message me in my messenger, Jessa Viruho. This is the reference kay Kaplan and Sakuzu na book. And thank you everyone for listening again. God bless. Keep safe always and don't forget to have a self-care. Alagaan din natin ating sarili kasi 'di ba? Health is wealth. And sorry nga pala sa sa mga background disturbances kasi maingay talaga yung paligid ko. And I hope you understand na kung bakit maingay. Thank you very much again. God bless.